I'm not a prophet, but sometimes I have prophetic dreams, like the one where I was at a garden party. Excuse me, everyone, I have a brief announcement to make. Jesus was black, Ronald Reagan was the devil, and the government is lying about 9/11. Thank you for your time, and good night.
That can't be true!
Nigga, like,
you make me better, and I know this don't make sense, but you make me better.
man, that was a pretty good video. I wonder what I'll do for the next video. Huh? What's that? Do a video about how Ronald Reagan is the devil. Okay. Now, who gave me this video idea? Who is Ronald Reagan? And just why is he the devil incarnate? With over 138 administration scandals, Reagan was bad, corrupt, destructive, hateful, vicious, vile. He was all the negative adjectives that you can think of to call someone. Now, I know that I've made myself a well-known Ronald Reagan hater.
I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy.
That's a nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back up?
He also loved calling African diplomats monkeys and destroying. Hi. I'm Think Peace Tribe's manager, and I'll introduce myself later. But first, let's get back to Think Peace Tribe. But why is that? Why do people like me and Gen Z in general have this outstanding hatred for Ronald Reagan? Why do I celebrate June 5th? Why is Ronald Reagan's grave a gender-neutral bathroom? Why am I subscribed to John Hinckley on YouTube? And just why do I hate Ronald Reagan? Well, with this video essay, I'm finally gonna do it. I'm finally going to tackle the man sent from the ninth circle of hell himself, Ronald Reagan. He's the devil. And here's why. Oh, and by the way, as you can tell, I've been watching a lot of H.D recently.
whole problem. Sell their houses to who, Ben? Fucking Aquaman!
And in H Bomber Guy fashion, this video is going to be long. So the timestamps are in the description below. And yeah. With that being said, let's get into the Yo, who is that? So if you clicked on this video, you either A, already know about Ronald Reagan and who he is, or B, don't know about him at all. So to start off this video, we're going to start off with part 1, a quick summary of Ronald Reagan and how he got into office.
Get it? Because it's literally a whiteboard. Anyways.
Ronald Reagan was born on February 6, 1991 in Temco, Illinois, but settled in Dixon, Illinois. His parents, Jack and Nellie Reagan, were both Democrats and Catholics, and even Reagan voted for Roosevelt because of Roosevelt's policies to provide jobs and work for Americans without jobs. These policies helped Ronald Reagan's dad get named as the local director of the Works of Progress Administration. According to MillerCenter.org, Ronald Reagan remembered his father as being fiercely opposed to racial and religious intolerance. He refused to allow his children to see the film Birth of a Nation because it glorified the KKK. Well, maybe if he took after his father, he wouldn't have done the things that he did to the black community. And you know, maybe he would have been opposed to racial intolerance instead of calling African diplomats monkeys. But more on that later. And also, yeah, I might have jumped the gun on making that joke about Mr. Ronald because, yeah, his father was an alcoholic.
That ain't P.
But yeah, actually, Mr. Marauder, can you pull up the retro TV overlay for me?
Fine. You know, I don't get paid enough for this shit.
Anyways, Reagan graduated from Tirrrb College in 1932 and got a job as a radio sportscaster. After working his way up, he became a staff announcer, and in 1937 went to California to cover the Chicago Cubs spring training games. Met a Hollywood agent who would let him do a screen test for Warner Brothers, got a contract, and that's how he basically started his acting career in Hollywood. Now, he isn't no Samuel L. Jackson, but he did appear in 52 films, which are all probably mid. Now look, I'm not saying that I'm hating, but I am. Because first off, anyone that is well known for not working with black actors unless they got extra pay for it, hint, hint, is a terrible actor in my humble opinion. And then two, have you ever heard anyone say, hey, turn on that Love Is the Air, or hey, turn on that Sergeant Murphy?
Blue eyes, hasn't she? Yes, she? That's the first impression I got. Now they seem slightly on the greenish side. Problem's going to require a lot of attention. Perhaps a different setting. Government's my new trick. I'm way ahead of you, mister.
Yeah, this is terrible.
Shoot, you guys know how I be. I came out the womb hating. I fall asleep at exactly 11 o'clock p.m. so that I'll wake up real early to have extra time to be a hater. But besides talking about Ronald Reagan's mid-acting career, it was through his acting career where he would meet his first wife, Wyman, and then his second wife, Nancy Thurgood Reagan. Through his work with General Electric, his politics changed from Democrat to conservative, mainly because of his change in economic status at the time, and because of his negative views on communism and the government. Quote, in 1945, his agent secured him a $1 million multi-year contract, more than $11 million in today's dollars. Reagan became financially well off for the first time in his life and resented paying high taxes. Basically, if you combine the fact that he switched tax brackets with his hate for the government already making him pay high taxes, you can see why him switching from a Democrat to a conservative adds up, and why he would later create economic policies that were only put in place to benefit the rich and not the actual working class. But again, we'll get to that later. Because Americans were becoming more aligned with the conservative messaging at the time, Reagan took this to his advantage with his A Time for Choosing campaign speech for Goldwater in 1964. And this is where his acting skills / experience starts to become noticed by the Republican Party. Sure, I think his acting is mid. However, Republicans at the time thought otherwise, and I can see why that is. Mainly because his A Time for Choosing speech, which you guessed it, is full of pro-military and anti-communist rhetoric, was a success for the Republican Party. And with that speech, he increased their donations to the party and to the candidates dramatically. With that being said, Reagan became sort of a trump card for the Republican Party through, from what I found said about him during this time, his electrifying and resounding way of speaking. The actor, now turned politician, ran for governor of California and won in 1966, tried to run for the presidency in 1968 and didn't get nominated, won for governor of California again in 1970, and tried to run for the presidency in 1976 and didn't get nominated. However, in 1980, after getting the nomination over George H.W. Bush and defeating the then President Jimmy Carter, he became the 40th President of the United States. So that's a quick summary of how Ronald Reagan got into office. The sports announcer turned actor switched to the Republican right because of his hatred for communism, taxes, and the government. Through his acting skills, he made Republicans fall in love with him through his political debut, A Time for Choosing speech, which then propelled him to become the governor of California and eventually the President of the United States. But now that I'm looking at this script, I just realized that it wasn't a quick summary. Did I just do that video essay YouTuber thing where I said that I'm going to quickly summarize something and then it ends up being not quickly summarized and long as hell? Yeah, you did the thing, but bro, why are you dressed like Huey Freeman from the Boondocks? Like, come on, what are you doing, a cosplay or something? Oh wait, hold up. Wait a minute, I do look like Huey Freeman, but I mean, you didn't have to be so mean-spirited and hateful about it. Speaking of being mean-spirited and hateful, Part 2, how Ronald Reagan dealt with the HIV/AIDS crisis. Did you see how I transitioned from Part 1 to Part 2 and pointed out how I looked like Huey Freeman at the same time? Yeah. Man, I am just killing it with the transitions on this video. But anyways, I'm going to be talking about homophobia to the extreme with this part. So if you're a part of the LGBTQ+ community and want to skip this part, you can, and I don't blame you for doing so. However, it is very important to bring up when talking about Ronald Reagan and why he is the devil. So I'll start off with this. Ronald Reagan's response to the HIV/AIDS crisis is one of the most evil and heinous actions that a person has ever committed. Right next to the Trail of Tears and purposely putting crack in the black inner cities. But we'll get into that later, won't we? Now, from the timeline that I found, it pretty much goes like this. From 1980 to 1981, deaths in the US from AIDS jumped from 31 deaths to 234, and in 1982, the death toll jumped to 853 deaths. Now, surely the President of the United States is going to mention this epidemic and won't have his own press secretary make jokes about AIDS during a press briefing. Wait, hold on. I feel like I'm being too on the nose here, so I'm gonna just be straight up with y'all. This man Reagan didn't even utter the word AIDS in public until 1985, and he only mentioned the word because his old Hollywood friend Rock Hudson died of complications resulting from AIDS. From 1982 to 1983, the death toll raised from 853 to 2,304. From 1983 to 1984, 2,304 to 4,251. And from 1984 to 1985, 4,251 to 5,636. And Ronald Reagan didn't say anything about it at all. But this is not surprising when you consider the fact that Reagan and his administration were Christians and thought that this epidemic was gay men receiving the wrath of God. The 1946 Bible mistranslations and its consequences. And if you think that I just made it the fuck up, then you would be wrong. Because Pat Buchanan, the communications director for Reagan, said, and I quote, "The poor homosexuals, they have declared war upon nature, and now nature is exacting an awful retribution." But oh, it does not stop there. Because there was this short film called When AIDS Was Funny, made by Scott Kalanick, and it was posted on the YouTube by Vanity Fair. In this short documentary, it goes over the AIDS timeline and shows from 1982 to 1985 how the AIDS death toll kept rapidly increasing and Reagan's administration made jokes about it and how Reagan had nothing to say about it. Can you imagine? 5,636 people dying before you acknowledge it in your second term as president, mind you. And when you finally say something about it, only because your friend died from it, there are 12,529 people dead. And after your 2 terms in office, 89,343 people died because you wouldn't get the ball rolling on it. Reagan and his administration didn't see gay people as human beings. He saw them as nuisances with ungodly lifestyles who got the gay disease. So why should he help? Why should he do anything about it? Why should he say a fucking word? It was only until his forced to be closeted friend died where he would do something. And not to mention the LGBTQ plus community protesting and fighting tooth and nail to get the literal president of the United States to do his fucking job and help the citizens of this country. I'm sorry, F.D Signifier. I know you told me to limit the cursing on these videos, but actions like this are fucking insane. And Reagan's "he froze, my guy hasn't moved in 40 minutes" type of silence on the HIV/AIDS crisis led to actions that affected people back then and people to this day. Matt Bernstein is a queer activist who talks a lot about this stuff on their Instagram account, and check out their work. It's great because Reagan's silence led the American people and even people outside of America to think that gay people and their issues didn't matter at all, which leads to widespread homophobia and things like LGBTQ+ people being prevented from visiting their partners in the hospital and attending their own partners' funerals. Misinformation about HIV/AIDS, all the inspirational icons and people we've lost due to AIDS, bans on men donating blood if they've had sex with another man even just once, hospital nurses leaving trays of food on the floor outside of AIDS patients' rooms because they thought that you could catch AIDS through touch, and so much more. Maybe if there were a presidential leader who could have acknowledged this when it was happening and got the ball rolling on it, which would have led to people being more educated about HIV/AIDS, which would have led to less HIV/AIDS cases and the AIDS death toll being extremely lower, and less widespread homophobia that is still affecting people 40 fucking years later. Hold on, I'm being too on the nose again. But to finish what I'm truly trying to say, Reagan knowingly let people die because the people dying were majorly gay. So let's do nothing about it, and let's let God do his thing. And don't give me that talk of, oh, it was a different time and generation, cause no, that's bullshit. Just because it was the 80s doesn't give Reagan an excuse to be blatantly homophobic and let everyone gay die of AIDS. Reagan was a true monster for his non-action when it came to the AIDS epidemic, and he didn't do his one job, which is to serve and protect the people of the United States of America. Well, I mean, if we're being honest here, the job of the president is to serve and protect white supremacist / evangelical Christian values and the rich and elite, while not particularly hiding it well. Speaking of protecting and serving the rich and elite while not particularly hiding it well, part 3. The failure of Reaganomics and his other policies. I'll talk about his other shitty policies later, but first, let's talk about Reaganomics for a second. So, do you remember in part 1 when I said, basically, if you combine the fact that he switched tax brackets with his hate for the government already making him pay high taxes, you can see why him switching from a Democrat to a conservative adds up, and why he would later create economic policies that were only put in place to benefit the rich and not the actual working class. But again, we'll get to that later. Yeah, I'm gonna get into that now. So, Reaganomics were economic policies that Ronald Reagan introduced, which advocated for widespread tax cuts, an increase in the military spending budget, and a reduce of government spending on domestic programs. Now, Ronald Reagan D-Riders with the whole shaboing in their mouths will tell you that Reaganomics were the best policies to ever be created because it created so many jobs. Businesses and the stock market boomed, and the government stopped having to help struggling black people in inner cities, which is great because nobody likes those dirty Negroes anyways. And they say these things because the negative effects of Reaganomics didn't hit them, because Reaganomics only had a positive effect on rich and elite white men. And this is a great time to talk about trickle-down economics because it supports what I'm talking about. Trickle-down economics is the idea that if you decrease taxes for the rich and give more money to the rich, then that money will eventually trickle down to the middle class and lower class. But here's the problem. This money didn't trickle down, and as the rich got richer, the middle class / lower class incomes were barely higher than they had been a decade before, and the poverty rate had risen as well. So yeah, trickle-down economics and Reaganomics was a failure because cutting the top tax rate doesn't lead to economic growth, income growth, wage growth, or job creation. This policy is purposely put into place to only benefit the rich and not the actual working class. And let's not even talk about how these policies tripled the national debt in America. But it's not surprising that Reagan would create these policies because back when he was an actor, he hated that he was a rich man paying high taxes. So, what do you think a man who in the past hated being rich and paying high taxes will do when he becomes the president of the United States of America? I'm just saying that this is typical greed and capitalism for you. And Ronald Reagan is the only thing trickling down into hell, of course. But before I move on to the next point, I gotta mention how the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan plays a big factor into why he was so successful in putting these policies into place. And there's this great video by Intellectual Media that extensively goes over this. But basically, the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan by John Hinckley lowered the criticisms about Reaganomics and his other policies, and his approval rating skyrocketed because people felt sympathy for the man. Now, while I was writing the script, I made a joke about the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, but I feel like if I say this joke, the Ronald Reagan supporters will mass report this video and my channel. So let's just talk about Reagan's increase in the military spending budget. Please don't report this video. Now, this is the part where shit gets so weird that you wonder, how did this person even become the president of the United States? Because Reagan shut down the money that was going into welfare / domestic programs and took this money to increase the military budget, and this is billions of dollars we're talking about here. Reagan did this, and by the way, I'ma challenge y'all to don't react in utter confusion when I say this. He did this to keep making nuclear weapons to outdo Soviet Russia, and to further go hard on Soviet Russia, put up to $30 billion on developing I gotta read this to y'all. A system armed with an array of space-based X-ray lasers that would detect and deflect any nukes headed towards the USA. That was unironically called the Star Wars program.
I don't understand why you even did this to yourself. This made you look so fucking stupid. This shit make you look so stupid.
And I'm not joking. All of this is real. And what's crazy is that while Reagan screwed over so many poor people by removing the money from domestic / welfare programs like free lunch and food stamps, he put money into the military and into pew-pewing Russia with fictional lasers because communism bad. And he introduced this in 1983. So bro got 2 terms to put this into action: the Red Scare and its consequences on society. But it does not end at the stupid ass Star Wars program, because there's this great video by Mayor of Ohio where he talks about this as well, and it actually ties into the Star Wars program. Because in 1985, Gorbachev told Reagan that he wanted to ban all nuclear forces if Reagan would give up on militarizing space. And you think that someone would use their cognitive thinking abilities in this situation and realize that, my Star Wars program has been a complete failure. Scientists and everyone around me are telling me that this is fucking stupid. And Gorbachev just told me that he would literally get rid of all of his nuclear weapons if I stop engaging in this dumb-ass plan that literally won't work. This is pretty much an easy decision. Is it not? Reagan was one signature away from taking a step to achieve world peace, and he looked at what Gorbachev presented to him and said no. No to not getting rid of nuclear weapons. No to not stopping the Star Wars program. And no to taking a leap towards world peace because this greedy asshole wouldn't get his head out of his BBL inflated ass. And let's not even talk about how this is still affecting us to this day. Because not only is that button for launching a literal nuclear apocalypse still out there because Reagan didn't make the easy choice, we still spend over $750 billion on the military today fighting no enemy, when that money can be put into, I don't know, maybe paying teachers more money, increasing minimum wage, universal health care, making college free, and canceling all student debt. I mean, anything than putting this overwhelming amount of money into the military for them to just invade and destroy the Middle East for their oil deposits. But no, we can't better this country, and we can't have nice things because it's too radical and it wouldn't work because that's communist, even though I have no idea what communism is. Like Reaganomics and all of his other shitty policies, it just consists of greed, corruption, and immorality to the extreme. And I've been using words like this to segue into the next part of the video, and these words can definitely be used for the next segment, but I'm gonna stop doing that because like I'm getting pretty bored of it. So let's just skip that and talk about part 4, the Iran-Contra affair and its consequences. Now, while I was writing this part, I had no idea where to even begin or how to even explain the Iran-Contra affair and its consequences. It's a situation that is so big and it had such big consequences looking back on it that where does one start when talking about this? I mean, I obviously figured it out, and the way that I can explain this entire thing is through the snowball effect. Now, the snowball effect is a process that starts from an initial state of small significance and builds upon itself, becoming larger and also potentially disastrous. And in the context of Reagan and the Iran-Contra affair, an action that Reagan did started at a small state of significance, but as time moved on, that action kept building upon itself, becoming larger and very, very, very disastrous. Now, as you've noticed, as I've been talking about Reagan, almost everything that he did had a snowball effect that had negative consequences and a negative effect on society to this day. But this one is different because the Iran-Contra affair snowballs into two things: how Reagan helped spawn the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, who would eventually go on to doing the 9/11 attacks, and how Ronald Reagan screwed over the black community through the crack trade and eventually the war on drugs. I'll get to that part later, but first, let's talk about what exactly the Iran-Contra affair was. Because the Cold War was going on, the communist Cuban-backed Sandinistas were fighting the American-backed Contras in Nicaragua. Knowing Reagan's hard-on for anti-communist insurgencies, it's not a surprise that he called them the moral equivalent of our founding fathers and backed them as much as possible by sending them money for guns and other supplies. But Reagan hit a snag because most of the Contra's funding came from the cocaine trade, and because of this, Congress passed the Boland Amendment that stopped the Department of Defense and the CIA from assisting the Contras. It even specifically states that none of the funds can be used to provide military assistance to groups trying to overthrow the Nicaraguan government. And in the spirit of being upfront like Congress was with this Boland Amendment, I'm not gonna be on the nose this time, because as you've already guessed, Reagan didn't give a fuck, as he usually did, and still funded the Contras anyways. And I know you're wondering, but Think Peace Tribe, how was Reagan still able to fund the Contras? Well, guy, gal, or non-binary pal viewing this video, Reagan was still able to fund the Contras because of the 1985 hostage situation in Lebanon, where 7 Americans were held by Iranian-backed terrorists. And these terrorists are important because Reagan told his advisors to find any way possible to bring those 7 Americans home. So Reagan and his national security advisor, Robert McFarlane, ended up finding a way and ended up giving weapons and missiles to the Iranian-backed terrorists, which equaled up to $30 million in exchange for the hostages, even though there was a trade embargo going on at the time. Now, Reagan and some members of his administration gave these weapons to these terrorists, and they didn't just give them weapons, they gave them power. And with this power, they would eventually start groups like the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And again, this is where the snowball effect comes into place, because one action leads into something bigger. Reagan gave these terrorists weapons and power. These terrorists started groups like the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Future US presidents destroy and destabilize the Middle East. These terrorists go through with the 9/11 attacks because of it, which leads to the War on Terror and many other devastating things that can be its own long YouTube video. Now, Reagan wasn't the only president to contribute to the snowball effect. Definitely not. But he definitely did contribute to it. And this is just one of the many consequences of the Iran-Contra affair. And yes, to all of the Ronald Reagan supporters watching this video, the US government definitely caused 9/11, deserved it, and have no one to blame but themselves for it happening in the first place. And let me make it clear, because people do that thing with my videos where they watch the video, right, and then miss the entire point of what I'm saying in the video and then leave the dumbest comments imaginable. So to make it clear, I said the US government deserved it, not the victims of 9/11, not the people. The US government. Shoot. Y'all ain't finna do me like how y'all did Hassan. Bro got all them death threats because he was speaking the truth and people didn't listen to what he actually said. That's why I had to spell it out for y'all. My God. Government. Because these people's cognitive thinking abilities are nowhere to be found, and the reading comprehension level is stuck at a pre-K level. But anyways, let's go back to the Iran-Contra affair. Hi, it's Editing Lonnie here, and I've made my second appearance in this video, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I was watching the video essay YouTuber that everyone strives to be like, ContraPoints, and I realized that doing intermissions in long form video essays like this would be pretty cool to do. So I did this intermission because, drumroll please, okay, because I'm switching the beat up. Yeah, I'm switching the beat up. Yeah, sorry to the people who was fucking with that K-Tronada type beat, but I'm trying to keep shit fresh, you know? And it's my video, so I should be able to do spontaneous shit like this with my content, and y'all don't have a problem with it, you know? So yeah, I'm switching the beat up, and I guess you can call this intermission, hold on, let me get the whiteboard I used for this video. Ah, Jesus, it was stuck in the wall. So like, can you see it? I think you can. Part 4.5, switching the beat up and intermission. Now for real this time, let's go back to the Iran-Contra affair. We have one more thing to talk about, and let's just get back to the video. A vintage film strip should be coming on the screen at any second now. There it is. Oh, okay. Bye y'all, and enjoy the video. You see, the weapons and missiles these terrorists got was equal to $30 million. And knowing how corrupt Reagan is, he gave $18 million out of that $30 million to the Contras. So basically, he sold weapons and missiles to Iran and then gave the profits to the Contras.
Genius!
However, it was eventually uncovered, and the fallout, well, it wasn't really a fallout. Like, a fallout like this is supposed to have people facing the consequences of their actions, and accountability is supposed to be held. But we're not dealing with any other person here. We're dealing with Ronald Reagan. So, of course, it was totally justified. Because Ollie North took the blame and came forward that he was the one that backdoored the money to the Contras. It is noted that he had done so with the full knowledge of National Security Advisor Admiral John Poindexter, and that he assumed Reagan was also aware of his efforts. And of course, Reagan lied and denied that he negotiated with terrorists.
To summarize, our government has a firm policy not to capitulate to terrorist demands, that no concessions policy remains in force. In spite of the wildly speculative and false stories about arms for hostages and alleged ransom payments, we did not, repeat, did not trade weapons or anything else for hostages, nor will we.
Only to go back on what he said a literal week later.
A few months ago, I told the American people I did not trade arms for hostages. My heart and my best intentions still tell me that's true, but the facts and the evidence tell me it is not.
And I'm pretty sure you can guess how this all ends, because, yeah, Reagan and mostly everyone involved got away scot-free. Reagan was never charged. Only one person named Thomas Kleins, a private contractor involved in the situation, served time in prison. And Mr. got off scot-free as well because of a technicality. And to show how really weird and fucked up this situation is for real, years later, Ollie North became the head of the NRA and worked at Fox News for a while. Like, we live in a country where all of this can happen, and yet they get off scot-free, and then years later can unironically end up becoming the head of the NRA and a Fox News host. Maybe we do live in a simulation. Or if you're white in America, you can just get away with anything. Yeah, definitely the second one. And I know you're thinking, wow, this seems like a bad ending path in an interactive story video game. But no, my fellow viewer, this isn't Detroit Become Human. This is real life. And yeah, this really happened. Oh yeah, and if you're wondering how this affected Reagan's presidency, it really didn't. because he was nearing the end of his presidency when this situation was occurring. And I mean, he's the guy who beat the USSR, the guy who beat communism. So it's not a surprise that he had one of the highest approval ratings of any US president even after this situation was over with and he left office. I mean, the US press did bug him about it, sure, but in the end, there was no accountability for Reagan and a majority of the people involved. Their lives got to continue as normal, as Reagan's actions would continue to have a negative snowball effect that had disastrous consequences for, well, everyone else. If you call that a fallout, then shit, I don't see it. I only see another situation that Reagan knowingly got himself into, get swept under the rug, overlooked, and there's no accountability to be found. Just like his non-action with the HIV/AIDS epidemic, just like Reaganomics, just like the Iran-Contra affair, and just like how he screwed over the black community. And speaking of how Reagan screwed over the black community, where did Reagan get the money to fund the Contras in the first place? Let's answer this with the Kahoot game! Where did Ronald Reagan get the money to fund the Contras in the first place? I'm trying to figure this out, but I can't really put my finger on it. What do you guys think it is? Is it... I don't know. It's the war on drugs! And yeah, remember when I said that the Iran-Contra affair snowballs into two things, and one of them being how Ronald Reagan screwed over the black community through the crack trade and eventually the war on drugs? Yeah. Smack that whiteboard, cause we finna get into Part 5. Ronald Reagan and what he did to the black community. So yeah, if you didn't know, now you know. Because Ronald Reagan got the money to fund the Contras from the crack trade and the war on drugs. But when we talk about the war on drugs, you gotta realize that it wasn't a war on drugs. It was a war on the victims of drugs. And it's not a coincidence that a majority of these victims were black people. Because I mean, let's just look at the facts. You have a guy who before he went into politics didn't like working with black actors unless he was paid for it. Then when he gets into politics and becomes the governor of California, he all of a sudden bans open carry for guns in California after the Black Panthers lawfully protested with guns. Now, I want you to be honest with me. Do you think that if it was white people lawfully protesting with guns, would Reagan still have banned the open carry for guns in California? And let's be real, you already know the answer to this question. Of course not! He only did that because it was black people lawfully protesting with guns. And of course, we can't let these savages near firearms. I mean, what happens if they get tired of us oppressing them and they decide to start fighting back? I'll put a pin in this and save this for a future YouTube video, but going back to Reagan. You have a guy who wanted to reform welfare and use the stereotype of the welfare queen to instill the idea that black people were too lazy to work and rely on public benefits to get by, even though white people made up the majority of the people receiving these public benefits. And if you've heard the same rhetoric being used by politicians to this day, that's because, well, of course, everything that Reagan did still negatively affects, how do I put this? Us to this day. And if we're really looking at this from Reagan's perspective, it's a genius tactic. I mean, like, there's already an outstanding hatred of black people in America, so let's just pin the blame on the people that we already hate to get what we want. Like, it's nuts when you really think about it, because this guy called black people lazy and took a huge reduction of their benefits, cut the funding for social programs that kept them stable and off the streets, and now you have a good amount of black people who are desperate to survive, and then this guy targets them and starts selling crack to them. You know, it's pretty easy to do all of these things when you view these people as below you in every way possible. So at the same time that Reagan is putting crack in black communities from Los Angeles to the rest of America, he'll also put these same black people in jail over the crack that he is putting into these communities, and instill mandatory minimums in which if you were caught with 5 grams of crack, you would get 5 years of prison time minimum. But not for cocaine, because that's a white people drug, so let's go easier on them and give cocaine the same minimum punishment if you have 500 grams of cocaine. But any less than that and you'll get out in under a year or less. After things like this happening, it's not a surprise that mass incarceration comes into play. The prison population booms under Reagan, and now every 1 out of 3 black boys can expect to go to prison in his lifetime. And despite making up close to 5% of the world's population, America has more than 20% of the world's prison population. But I feel like you guys aren't hearing what I'm saying for real. And to the Ronald Reagan supporters probably watching this video, you probably just think that I'm another young black Gen Z Marxist who doesn't really know anything about anything. I wasn't alive back then, so I can't really talk about it because I didn't know how it was back then, is what you're probably thinking. So I'm gonna switch it up and I'm going to talk to someone who directly saw how Reagan affected her community back then and how it still affects her community to this day. So I got the best and most important woman that I know to talk about this. And if you're wondering who it is, it's my mom, of course. Okay, we're recording. So, tell the viewers watching this video about yourself.
Well, hello. Yes, I am a mother, a wife. I have 2 children. I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, right in the area of Black Wall Street. That was an area that we frequented in going to and from school. Elementary, middle school, and high school were predominantly and historically black schools. That's where I was reared. We did have students that were bused in from predominantly white neighborhoods into the black community, so it was a little bit different to go to our magnet school programs. But again, my father went to my high schools and junior high schools, and all of my relatives. So it's historically a black environment is where I grew up.
Okay, so we know that you grew up in a historically black environment, Black Wall Street, like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and everything. So, what do you remember about the Ronald Reagan era?
Wow, so the Ronald Reagan era is the time when I really started learning and listening and understanding a lot more about politics. I was at an age where it was incredibly important for me to study a little bit more from a child's perspective about politics and the United States presidents and Congress and the United States Supreme Court. So when Ronald Reagan became president, we saw a lot of changes prior to Ronald Reagan becoming president and instituting policies that he instituted, cutting a lot of domestic spending. We enjoyed opportunities to have activities at parks and recreation centers right around the corner from our homes, where we were able to enjoy free lunches or free summer activities. We were able to do a lot of sports activities that didn't cost a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
But when Ronald Reagan got in office, domestic spending affected not only those parks and recreations. The money started decreasing, the programs started decreasing, and what happens when programs are not available in a community? Kids are going in another direction, and some kids, of course, survived and kept involved. But there were some other kids that had potential to be great athletes, great mathematicians, scientists, but they didn't get to realize their full potential because of the effect of those Ronald Reagan policies, specifically the war on drugs and the domestic spending cuts that affected the housing and urban development, public housing. Money started decreasing. So a lot of the things that were happening in to try to enhance lives, well, they were no more.
Because you had things like the welfare queen, where Ronald Reagan and his administration demonized like a majority and really all of the black community by calling them lazy and calling them, they rely on public benefits to get by, even though it was white people receiving the majority of these benefits. And
so true. The media had a lot to do with the hysteria
definitely
and creating stereotypes within the power of the media, showing not those excellent stories, black excellent stories that existed, showing those stories of degradation, the stories of men and women, boys and girls, being affected by crack or crack cocaine, and so the stories were pushed by media, in line with Ronald Reagan and what he had to offer, which was not much to our community.
Yeah, it really wasn't, because the policies that he put into place when he cut those domestic social programs, he really put African Americans in the worst circumstances imaginable, and he made them become desperate, and then he targets them and starts selling crack and crack cocaine to them. So that's how that happens, and then that leads into the war on drugs, mass incarceration, and everything else that comes along with that. But
because with mass incarceration, that increased exponentially. Teenagers, you began to see teenagers, who were excellent, on the football field, excellent on the football court, excellent in the classroom, being turned in different directions, and may have had to start selling drugs, not, for, any type of,
just like trying to gain money. They were trying to
money to some of them to help their families. Economic empowerment was not on his agenda at all. Now, it's not to say that the entire black community, was affected by the drug on wars. Not the entire black community,
but a good amount. It was a good amount.
And if you weren't, you could have been affected in ways, for example, having a relative that may have either sold drugs, or a relative that succumbed to being a participant of taking drugs.
I say like as I view it now, and as I see like the effects of everything that Reagan did, especially on the black community, I just see how what he did just really like tarnished the black community now, like through like stereotyping and all the issues we face, like that thing about black people can't swim, you know, that stereotype about black people can't swim, that came because Reagan cut domestic social programs, the YMCA and everything, and closed down pools.
Right, and another thing also, the police presence when the war on drugs hit, police presence increased exponentially.
Yes.
And we grew up as young children, really learning and being educated in befriending police officers. They were friendly to us as children. So to turn around during the war on drugs to see that same system that we grew up as little children, learning about, respecting the police officers,
get like changed.
Actually knowing the police officers by name, and you know, hey, how you doing? That was, you know, how it was when we were children. And when the war on drugs hit, you know, it was the tables turned, and it was just there was no community policing in that aspect. Community policing where they actually got to know the families in the community and really cared when we were younger. When the war on drugs hit, it was just a different mindset in law enforcement.
Yeah.
There were more guns that were filtered into our communities, not only drugs, but guns as well. And then the gang activity also.
It rose because of that, yeah. I say like really 3 things that I've noticed really contributed to the police system being the way that it is now. The war on drugs, obviously the 1994 crime bill that Bill Clinton put into place, and 9/11, because right after 9/11 you saw the police get militarized. You saw them have different equipment. You saw them use like different techniques. You saw them go way harder on people than they really needed to be, especially minorities and black people. You saw that happen over time, and I just think like, you say like you actually knew the police, you actually knew them by name, y'all were friends, y'all knew each other, but then over time stuff changes.
Yes, it did. It did. And even when I was growing up, there were police officers that lived in the community, so we had a respect. Really, before as children, and before I became a teenager, we had a lot of respect for police officers. Now the system itself has a lot of work to do, a lot of reforming to do. But we've seen in our lifetime those bad police officers and those bad policies in law enforcement that has caused death and destruction.
Yeah. I would say that well, when it comes to like the all cops are bad thing, like, how can I say this? The bad cops outweigh the good cops, and then you have the other side. You have good cops who don't say anything, and then there's a culture within the police to not say anything, to keep stuff on the low, to turn off body cams, to erase evidence, to do all these heinous actions. So they continuously do this, and this still happens. We saw what happened with Rodney King, and this is still going on, like, in those cases, and it's so like, where I remember Trayvon Martin. You remember when that happened? When Trayvon Martin happened? And then I was so confused as to why George Zimmerman did not face any repercussions for his actions, and that was until I looked at the 13 documentary. We actually watched this as a family one time, and I've watched that documentary like 5 or 6 times. it is so good. To the viewers watching this video, you need to watch that documentary. It is, oh my gosh, it's so good. But it explained how the NRA created gun policies and stand your ground laws, and that's how George Zimmerman got off, because of those stand your ground laws, even though
they were not made for us.
Yeah, they weren't made for us.
They were not made for our benefit.
No, not at all.
So there's disparities. Disparities.
But another question is, what was it like seeing how these policies affected your community as a young child during this time?
Yeah, we were saddened by that was the first time I have ever had an opportunity to see in real time men and women suffering from addiction, and the media really put out a lot of visuals.
Yes.
Things that were happening in our various communities across the nation, and it was disheartening. The thing about it is, rehabilitation was not,
it was not an option. Yeah.
It was not on the forefront, not like it is now when it comes to the opioid crisis. That's disheartening. Why is that? Why was it different for the opioid crisis than it was for the crack cocaine crisis?
Right.
I mean, that was a crisis, and it was affecting our people tremendously. It broke up families. Families, fathers that or mothers that went through that time period, whether they committed crimes or whether they got arrested and went to prison or went to jail. I mean, that it just broke up families.
Definitely.
Similarly to when our ancestors were enslaved and brought over here to the United States. Families were broken up. So we've always had a story to tell about having broken families, and a lot of it is not, our own fault.
No, it's not. No.
It's not our own fault.
You go through 400 years of slavery. You go through Jim Crow, gentrification, the prison industrial complex, mass incarceration, the military industrial complex. All of these things happen. And then you have people today acting like these things don't affect the now, which is crazy to me. Because, because it's like you see how, Reagan did what he did and how it really comes from that Jim Crow era, like how it comes, and how that stems from 400 years of slavery, how that stems from racism and everything like that. So it's just crazy to see how people are trying to rewrite history. They've done that a lot, and they've done that a lot with Ronald Reagan. It is absolutely insane how I didn't learn any of this until I got in high school, and I did that by myself. I wasn't taught about the full extent of the Iran-Contra affair the way that I am now. I wasn't taught about how I wasn't taught. No, I wasn't taught about the HIV/AIDS crisis. That is just crazy to me, and that was never taught. They never taught about how his administration literally called that epidemic at the time the wrath of God upon gay men, right? It's like this stuff needs to be said, but when you really think about it, rewriting history and making your own stories be told is how Ronald Reagan is viewed, how he is today, the American president, the guy everyone strives to be. You know what I'm saying? It's
I don't know if that's something this new generation of adopting. Ronald Reagan.
Actually, they are, because you see how Reagan and Trump have similarities. You see how people called Trump the second coming of Ronald Reagan. You see this language being used. Yeah, you remember that? I remember that.
Intellectually, I mean, no.
Ronald Reagan really wasn't that intellectual.
One was entertainer.
Yeah.
The level of intellectual intelligence. I mean, so I guess there's definitely similarities when it comes to that.
Yeah, their acting was top tier. I have a couple of clips in this video, actually, where it's so funny. During the Iran-Contra affair, Reagan got caught, and originally he literally said, I repeat, we did not sell weapons for hostages, nor will we. He literally says that on screen. Yeah, and then months later, well, actually like a week later, to the press after Ollie North testified, he said that wasn't true. But months later, on screen, it's like, it's so weird because he kept up the lie. He said my heart and my like instincts tell me that, you know, this isn't true, but the facts and the evidence tell me that I'm wrong, right? It's like you're using this type of language, like you're still trying to keep it up. Why? You were caught. They caught you. They have the receipts. They have everything. It's really insane. Like, that's right. I was doing the research for this video. I found that, and I found that while I was editing this video. I was just like, wow, like that is insanity. And they don't teach this in schools. They don't teach that anywhere. You won't find this stuff unless you go for it yourself. That's why a lot of people.
And that's the beauty. That's the beauty of your generation. You all have access, so much more. Because technology has enhanced you all's lives tremendously, and it's if I had to leave anything and say anything to your audience, is to continue to stay the course, to gain information beyond what you learn in school, dig deeper. Beyond the books that are just laid out for you in school, dig much deeper. You all can, go to the internet just like that. I would have had to go, when I was in college, went to the Library of Congress and dug deeper. But just continue to dig deeper into the history. You have to know the history.
Yes.
And the history doesn't start in the 60s. The history's, way going to, decades ago. Travel through those decades and see where we are today. And history is repeating itself, on so many different levels.
Absolutely.
Stay the course when it comes to understanding what's happening in Congress. And some people don't want to listen to the news. That's fine. You can dig deeper by going online and actually reading the bills that may be affecting you. Read it.
Definitely look deeper. Yes.
And even the United States Supreme Court cases, you can watch or actually listen to the Supreme Court cases being held in live time. So just by going to C-SPAN, you can hear what's happening in the United States Supreme Court. You can actually sit there and listen. Yeah. They don't have video in there, but they do have audio.
Yeah, they have audio.
Interesting. And once you dig deeper, you'll realize, wow, I needed to know more of this. How am I going to spread the word? How am I going to share this? And you're doing the greatest thing, sharing it via social media and the platform that you have. Yeah. It's incredibly important just to share the truth, speak truth to power.
I definitely have to. That's why I wanted to make this video. That's why it's been taking so long to make it. Of course, I just feel like I can truly make an impact, and just as long as I change at least one person's mind, at least as someone can look at this video and think, and just rethink what they've been told previously, and just realize that everything that they thought was not the truth, that would mean everything to me when it comes to this, because this is very important. When we talk about Ronald Reagan, oh my goodness, that is like,
right. But
yeah.
Reagan, those policies, even when it got to went to Bill Clinton.
Yes. Yes. Joe Biden, Bill Clinton. Yes. It doesn't even stop there.
Crack versus cocaine and the sentencing disparities that existed, that they're just starting to tackle right now.
Yes.
Marijuana, when it comes to the war on drugs, marijuana was so taboo. Oh my gosh, they have.
Which is crazy to think about now. Which is crazy because
You know why? Because it's money. Money has always been the root of America's existence. When it comes to owning property, which we were property, owning land, which we never got our 40 acres and a mule.
Never were. Never were. We're never gonna get that.
When it comes to reparations, a lot of other ethnic groups have received reparations.
Oh, of course, yeah, but never us though. Never us.
Yeah. You know, so there's still a lot to know and a lot to learn. But once you do gain all this knowledge and you spread the word, what do you do with it? It's incredibly important for, especially your generation and all generations, to learn how to organize.
Yes.
To gather bodies of people together, like-minded people, to organize and to, you know, penetrate those systems, you know, in an intellectual way. So you have those that are the Malcolm X generation. You have those that are the Dr. Martin Luther King generation. Some are a little bit of both. So you know, you just gotta find what you can do with the knowledge that you do have, and effectuate change in our communities, because the fight never ends.
Yeah,
you have all the knowledge, but you have to do something with it to empower our people.
And it's like you definitely can. You saw Smalls, for example. Man made a whole Amazon labor union. Never been done before. And that did like the biggest change imaginable. Like, yeah, it's like, yes, like this is what we need right here. That's it. Yeah, like.
The thing about it is, in this country, we have the freedom to do that.
Yeah, like, yeah.
We have the freedom of speech. We have those freedoms under the Constitution of the United States. Understand that Constitution. Understand what rights we all have.
And it's like people are becoming more awake now, especially this generation. They are realizing that everything prior to now and how it's affecting us right now has been awful. I mean, minimum wage, like healthcare, it's bad, it's terrible. So
because I think, oh my goodness, minimum wage a few years ago was maybe $7.25, and then they started fighting for to get up to $15. I'm not even too sure exactly what it is right now. When I was growing up, it was about $3.25.
See, yeah, it took them like so long, yeah.
20 years for it to get to $7,
which is crazy. 20 years to get to $7.
So those are the things that we have to challenge. We have to challenge the system because you know the economy, you know, the prices are going up and the cost of living is going up, but you know you have salaries and
staying the exact same that they've been for the past 10 to 20 years.
Oh, right. So you know, the one thing that I was reflecting on this week was, especially with what's going on in Ukraine, and I know we strayed from the Ronald Reagan conversation, but one thing, you know, our beloved Tupac Shakur once said in one of his lyrics, you know, they have money for wars, but they can't feed the poor. That's incredible. Think about that. I mean, he was a prophet. Tupac Shakur, for real.
That is a great take on the prison industrial complex. I actually touched on that with this video. We spend all this money on the military just for them to go to the Middle East and destroy and destabilize the Middle East for the oil reserves, when that same money can be put into our communities, can be put into paying teachers more money, can be put into giving us free healthcare, can be put into increasing the minimum wage. It's like actually insane how the government does not help the people out. This is why we have to do it ourselves.
Student loans.
Yes. Eliminate student. Yes.
What happens? Economic empowerment.
Yes, economic freedom, economic empowerment, financial freedom. Yes, all that happens once you start helping out your own people, protect and serve the people.
And what's gonna happen then when we do have economic empowerment, financial freedom? We start pouring money back into the economy.
Yeah, you can actually improve this country a little bit.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
I just don't understand that. But again, we have to continue to galvanize, organize, educate ourselves, and empower ourselves.
Yeah.
You know.
This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation.
Yeah. you already repeated what you would say to the viewers watching this video, but like, what's something that you want to tell them right now, like that's different from what you said previously?
Empowered people empower people. Empowered people empower other people. And that's what we have to be. We have to empower ourselves so we can continue to bring up the rest and empower others.
That was great. Oh, yes. Mom, I love you.
Does everyone know that you're my son? Of course they know.
Oh my gosh, like, oh, I love this. I love talking with you about I love talking to you about things like this. I love that I have like a community, like parents that are actually awake to these things, and I can actually converse with them, and I can actually have you on my platform. We can go back and forth. It's why you are the reason why I'm where I'm at right now. Like, yeah, like the stuff that I'm doing, the stuff that I'm talking about, it is really because of you. I mean, you had us in the 5th grade singing the Black National Anthem. You remember that? Yeah. So it was always like I was always had like a certain viewpoint on other things. It's just like now that I have a like platform and I can actually make an impact, it's great that I get to have you on my stuff. That's great. That's excellent.
I appreciate that. Yeah, you know, it's just critically important for parents, you know, once again, to continue to learn, not just watch television, but
learn.
More about ourselves, our history, and growing up, I just wanted for you guys to be able to know who you are and whose you are. I wanted to lay a solid foundation. Put you in the right environments. You were able to dip your toe into one particular environment that where you were in the quote minority, and it, you soared. You proved yourself beyond measure.
Boy, I can't imagine being in that place. Oh man, that would have been bad. Nah.
As the minority, but you showed out and showed up and showed out in all aspects. And after school every day, I wanted you all not to get lost in their world.
Yep.
That's why I'm singing this Black National Anthem. Know these words, understand what they mean. And then we did a little slick Rick at the same time.
Yeah! Yeah! That's right.
Was that the children's story? Yeah.
That was.
Yeah, so I wanted you all to, be well-rounded, but you do know that you can step into any environment and be successful and know who you are, and so that's the one thing I wanted to always have instill in you all, and until this day, continue to make sure you all know that.
Oh yeah, well, thank you so much for having this conversation and interview with me. But even with all of this information and all of this data being presented, even after doing an interview where a person living back then talks about how Reagan affected the black community, people will still turn a blind eye to everything and support Reagan regardless. It's crazy how everything that I've talked about so far has just been overlooked by Republicans and Reagan Shaboom supporters. Like, it's actually insane. And they will literally not care at all. Even after Reagan was caught on tape calling African diplomats monkeys. Even after Lee Atwater, a campaign strategist to Ronald Reagan, was caught on tape explaining the Southern strategy.
In other words, you start out, and now y'all aren't quoting me on this. You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts your backfire. So you say stuff like force busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than white.
And even after all of that, it's like none of that matters to them. So they either turn a blind eye to it, or they just forget that it ever happened. Because these things didn't really affect them in any negative way, so why should they care? It's why you have these same people say that Ronald Reagan was a good president for the African American community. And their answer as to why that is that Reagan signed in the MLK Day initiative that made MLK's birthday a federal holiday. Like, what? Okay, yeah, that's good and all, but while he was putting the MLK Day initiative into place, he was literally demonizing black people and destroying our communities. You know, I hope that I can educate a lot of people with this video, but like, how do I get through to these people? The Republicans, the Reagan Shaborn supporters watching this video. Why do they support this man the way that they do? And call him the greatest US president, even though the evidence shows that that's not the case at all. It's been on my mind for years, ever since I learned about Reagan, and especially after I did the mentally taxing research for this video. Like, it's mind-boggling to the extreme, and I do not understand. Like, oh my god.
I guess the Ronald Reagan supporters really got to his head, huh? God. Okay. Oh God. Wait a minute. Okay. Oh shit. Okay. Just ignore the fact that my hair magically changed in between this video. I'm getting it done tomorrow. Just hold on. I gotta explain something to y'all real quick. Listen, I know we haven't been formally introduced yet, and I'm gonna fix that right now, okay? So, oh man, my name is Mr. Marauder, and I'm Think Peace Tribes' manager. I'm here to let him know when he has a sponsorship for his videos, when other people want to collab on his videos, and vice versa, basically. So basically, with this video, I made a couple of calls, I got some favors in, and y'all, you will not believe who I got to be featured on this video. Not only did I get the next up-and-coming leftist YouTuber Tirrrb to be a part of this, I got one of the biggest YouTube channels, one of the literal faces and heads of LeftTube, F.D Signifier, to be a part of this joint. So first, we're gonna start off with Tirrrb and see what he has to say, and then we're gonna move on to F.D Signifier and see what he has to say. And while I calm Think Peace Tribe down, they're going to explain the war on drugs and its impacts. Y'all, I don't know how I pulled this off, but let's get into part 5, the war on drugs and its impacts, Tirrrb and F.D Signifier's part. Oh shit. Editing Lonnie, are we doing a simple cut to a black screen, or am I gonna break the fourth wall on my Deadpool type shit and pull Tirrrb's video part down from the screen? Oh, okay, we're doing a fade to black. I'll see y'all in part 6. Okay. God, I don't know how I did this. Alright. Bye, y'all. Whew, Lord. Oh,
actually think, Peace? You're judging Ronald Reagan by his time. Ronald Reagan was a strong, charismatic patriot of America. He made America better. Reaganomics was so good for the economy. And he liked black people. I mean, look at his hair. That's basically a fake.
Sorry guys, there was a conservative convention and I thoroughly enjoy keeping them in my basement. I think of them like abstract art. They're like a medium of humans that are visibly useless aside from comedy relief. Look at that piece of abstract art. He would have voted for Obama, but he loves Trump. What a conundrum of white supremacist beliefs we're just supposed to take as modern day activism. Tirrrb, note to self, stop coming up with condescending metaphors reminiscent of petty subtweets designed to radicalize your viewers. I'll cater to white liberals this time, I guess. Bleached buffoons. If you didn't know, which I don't know how you didn't know because it's literally the title of this video, Ronald Reagan is the devil and he was a menace in his presidency. You may play devil's advocate and talk about his contributions to Americans, but to that, and I really mean, what do you internally mean by American? It seems like any white president with charisma can have all their racist statements and policies justified by claims of economic servitude. Even then though, aren't claims of economic servitude basically praising America for being imperialistic bastards? I swear, some of the justification sounds like this. Hey guys, that president contributed to the disenfranchisement of black people everywhere. That's pretty bad. Damn, bro. Yeah. But he's not that bad. Really? How? He was also an imperialistic bastard who siphoned exploited labor into our economy. Isn't that bad? I said he was also an imperialistic bastard who siphoned exploited labor into our economy. This film is brought to you by Niggas Against Capitalism. I mean, I don't know if I'm a Marxist yet, but niggas are definitely against capitalism. We could see this in the utilization of Reagan's dog whistles. The first and most prominent one was his campaign slogan, which was later taken by everyone's favorite Oompa Loompa. Let's make America great again. This slogan is supposedly an all-encompassing term meant to make quote-unquote Americans the main focus. But when was America ever great? Now, Reagan had his stay in the 1980s. Let's rewind 20 years back, before Reagan was president, to 1960s America, famous for their cars, truck stop corps, and hippies. Now tell me, was America great in this time? When you had the most influential peaceful black activists rallying people to fight for black rights, murdered in the streets. John F. Kennedy, one of the most recognizable presidents of all time, quick-scoped off a building. And when the oppression of the LGBTQ+ community was so rampant, so sizzling, so steaming, it boiled into a 3-day riot, now known as Stonewall. No? Didn't think so either. But maybe Reagan was talking about 40 years back before his stay. 1940s America, where internment camps divided Japanese Americans into hellish prison systems solely meant to isolate Japanese Americans from the general public. I guess America was great here? No? I didn't think so either. The term Make America Great Again is a white supremacist dog whistle meant to demean the decades of progress activism has brought us in favor of keeping the good old values of America. But the fact is, unless you were white, America was never great. From the minorities it exploited over the years, to the oppressive policies it continues to place on its population. Make America Great Again is a misleading slogan by design, meant to strike at the heartstrings of white people by coding white guilt with patriotism. Make America Great Again is the Republican male equivalent to the white girl that dreams about time skipping to the 1940s in order to dance in the rain. Like Hillary. That's cool for you white girls, you know. I drink a Starbucks latte once in a while, you know. I walk my hairless chihuahua once a week, you know. I cry to avoid the repercussions of my actions too, you know. But the difference is I can't do that in court. Also, if you didn't visibly notice, I am a nigga. A nigger, to be exact, which means I can't lay in my ignorance and pretend America was always great. Therefore, I can't sympathize with the condescending attitudes of these 50-year-old white men trying to run our country. So in my anger, I'm going to verbally degrade, cyberbully, ascend into the 6th dimension with my 6th-dimensional knife, and commit 6th-dimensional manslaughter all over this car salesman's face. And I'm gonna give him a little kiss after, because love is always the answer. And now, with the help of my flamingo, we are going to present to you the war on drugs. Cling, cling. They let him go. They let him go from that one channel. Hey, I know that guy. The war on drugs has never only been national, by the way. The war on drugs was a global campaign, led specifically by the US federal government. They waged their war by utilizing drug prohibition, military aid, and military intervention. And the whole entire point of this war? Well, it was to reduce the illegal drug trade in the United States, which we'll learn is far from the truth. It turns out it was just institutional racism, you know? Who would have thought, you know, like, who would have thought that America was just being racist and this wasn't an actual war? It was just racism. Not me. The US is just like my Tinder date who only wanted me because I was black and 6'5". Can you stop projecting? However, a culmination of historical resentment led to political demonization of minority ethnic groups. To begin with, the demonization of drug abuse in itself was utilized in order to oppress minorities as far back as the 1800s. Back when drugs weren't being used to arrest black men by the thousands, the image of drugs was medicine. You know, the happy drug. We like that drug. It helps us breathe. Yay! As asthma. You can live with asthma with an inhaler, but not if you're diabetic. Unless you're like a millionaire. At this point in time, drug addicts were seen as white old citizens who needed them in order to survive. And then when Chinese immigrants arrived with opium, the US turned its patriotic head. Because when there's immigrants to oppress, America never fails to reject. This was one of the first premonitions towards the war on drugs. Instead of the lovely image of the sickly white population being the face of addiction, this political opening allowed the US to demonize an ethnic group of people and thus push into laws the regulation of drugs and the judicial punishment of drug users. White supremacy got a 2-for-1 special with this one. Oppression mixed with the new economic sector. Oh, but it was for the economy though, right? Think about the economy. Why is my flamingo not back there? Why was he on the ground? He chillin'. They like kissing. At this time, opium was now used as a fear tactic against white America. The government used Chinese immigrants to instill fear of joblessness and crimes in the eyes of white Americans. Furthermore, it led into an anti-Chinese immigration campaign in 1882 called the Chinese Exclusion Act, which raged on for 10 years. And then in the 1900s, anti-cocaine laws directed at black men in the South started to be put into effect. These drug prohibition policies, historically, work in favor to disenfranchise and oppress minorities. Black history and character degradation is emphatically intertwined both socially and politically. It's important to know the history surrounding the defamation of the black image in order to truly understand the war of drugs and the consequences it's had in the modern day. We can see this in the modern day through the statistics of the prison industrial system. Black men compose of about 13% of the US male population, but even then disproportionately, nearly 35% of all men who are under state or federal jurisdiction with a sentence of more than 1 year are black. 1 in 3 black men born in 2001 can expect to be incarcerated in their lifetime, compared to 1 in 6 Latino men and about 1 in 17 white men. Black people are incarcerated at state prisons at a rate 5.1 times greater than that of white people. 1 in 18 black women born in 2001 will be incarcerated sometime in her life, compared to 1 in 45 Latino women and 1 in 111 white women. Remember how I said y'all could cry to get out of jail time? White woman tears, the most powerful thing in America. White woman tears. Although black women make up to 13% of the female US population, 44% of incarcerated women are black. These statistics are fueled by a force called institutional racism, which is discrimination or unequal treatment on the basis of membership in a particular ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized, arising from system structures or expectations that have become established within an institution or organization. However, just like my brother Foreign said,
but that's the nuance that statistics miss. So much of science aims to sterilize situations into their most isolated elements, but ultimately miss the nuance and the subtleties of those situations.
Statistics can sometimes dehumanize and take away from the struggles of the people affected. There are real people being oppressed and marginalized here. Millions of lives are being exploited and mistreated just because they didn't spawn in with the white color. And this has been a problem which has ravished America since conception. we gotta start from the beginning, the very start. And of course, we gotta go to the South. In the South, following emancipation, Black Americans became specific targets of policing, sentencing, and confinement. The reason why Black men were targeted by the prison industrial system is solely derived from a loophole in the 13th Amendment. The loophole states that citizens cannot be enslaved unless convicted of a crime. And due to the disproportionate rates at which these laws target Black and other minority groups, we can deduce that this loophole exists intentionally to target minorities. It's just like double Dutch slavery. You gotta skip through some extra loopholes and obstacles to get to the slaves, but they're still there. And this example is only one of the many historical incidences we can see a ripple effect in the modern day today. By utilizing the criminalization of Black people, the US government could justify monitoring our neighborhoods and exploiting our labor through the now legal means of slavery.
So, is this how historical sentiment built?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I was gonna say that, yeah. These demented and flawed ideas of Black criminality continued to shape political discourse and policy decisions through the rest of the 20th century. And finally, in 1965, President Lyndon Johnson decided to capitalize on these misconceptions by declaring the war on crime, which was, in essence, an attack on the image of Black portrayal, a process which resulted in the expansion and modernization of American law enforcement. It's important to know that President Lyndon Johnson also made these accusations based on evidence that was never there. Yes, he did it despite stable or decreasing crime levels. Yes, take that in. All President Lyndon Johnson had to do was blow the same historic dog whistle of Black criminality in order to get America on his side. He, in essence, started a race war with no evidence. He literally destabilized hundreds of Black communities and sent thousands of Black men to jail, just off the historical sentiment that Black people are thugs. After they dehumanize, these men then capitalize.
But Tirrrb, there was an increase in crime.
Listen, basically increases in crime specifically at urban centers could be tied to changes in law enforcement practices and crime reporting, meaning the prison industrial system and the cops were receiving so much money, more arrests and racial profiling was inevitable. Since there were more cops and a surging radicalized point of view regarding a war on crime directed at Black people, there would be, of course, an increase of racial incidents considered as crimes. Nevertheless, a discourse about high crime rates in Black areas from the outside looking in supported the already radicalized image of Black people. In this way, President Lyndon was basically Fire Lord Ozai, master of white bending. His loyal army were the police, and the comet of Ozan glazing across the sky. Feeding into his resentment was the white discourse about Black degradation, giving him the powers of the KKK. Okay, metaphor gone on for way too long. It's giving Grand Wizard fanfic. Wait, who the fuck is that guy up there? It's glowing because I edited it to glow. Well, Tirrrb, there's not enough Black men in jail, and I believe that America could be great again if we tripled that number. Did you just descend from heaven? Yeah, Tirrrb, shut the fuck up, Lyndon Johnson. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. This time go to hell.
Okay, Tirrrb, so now that Lyndon Johnson is dead now, how does this tie into Reagan?
Well, we have one more step to get there. President Lyndon's actions and policies were simply a premonition to something bigger at play. Specifically, a white supremacist push to government tactics of incarceration instated to disenfranchise Black people. However, the first time an anti-drug campaign was ran under the moniker of the War on Drugs was during President Nixon's time in office, which then President Reagan would then mimic in his presidency to an even more radicalized degree. In the month of June 1971, President Nixon took his mantle as the next charismatic white supremacist, declaring a war on drugs.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive. I have asked the Congress to provide the legislative authority and the funds to fuel this kind of an offensive.
Following this declaration, he dramatically increased the presence of federal drug control agencies and pushed through measures such as mandatory sentencing and no-knock warrants. This policy was in effect as little as 50 years ago. And during this time, President Nixon gave the police all the power to terrorize minority neighborhoods. Later on, John L. Rickman, counsel and assistant to the president for domestic affairs under President Richard Nixon, admitted, "You want to know what this was really all about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and Black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or Black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and Blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. assemblies. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about drugs? Of course we did. Furthermore, in his policies, Nixon temporarily placed marijuana in Schedule 1, the most restrictive category of drugs. But how did this oppressive war come to be? Well, race risings in the late 1960s, combined with ongoing demonstrations against the war in Vietnam, left Americans feeling uncertain and afraid of the future. I wasn't born in the 1960s, but due to the factors at hand, we could tell the social climate was riddled with a sentiment for change. Richard M. Nixon, the Republican presidential candidate from, at the time, California, played on these fears by conjuring up the idea for a war on drugs, which targeted anti-war demonstrators, activists, and African Americans. Being the conniving little male misfit he is, Nixon used his war on drugs as part of his campaign, even though the identified problem, drugs, and the articulated strategy in response were based on questionable data. Black people are causing marijuana to corrupt the lives of our children. Dog, do you have a source for that? Trust me, bro. In an interview for the book Smoke and Mirrors, The War on Drugs and the Politics of Failure, Dan Baum interviewed John L. Rickman. I also want to say John L. Rickman contributed in the war on drugs, so this is by no means an appraisal of his character. But when you have other white supremacists telling you, bro, you're going too far, and they're your friends, your homies, the boys in the hoods, you have to realize what you're doing is blatantly wrong. However, during the interview, Elric stated the true motivations behind Nixon's war on drugs strategy, stating that Nixon's invention of the war on drugs as a political tool was cynical. But every president since, Democrat and Republican alike, has found it equally useful for one reason or another. 1 in every 8 black men has been disenfranchised because of a felony conviction. And as we stated before, racial profiling in America was not new. In fact, it was still happening as early as emancipation. But Nixon somehow stirred up the political landscape of America so much, with such risked action, that America's relationship between race, drugs, and the justice system was never the same. Nixon's racist approach pertaining to the African American image has been devastating. According to the Department of the Justice Bureau statistics, black males ages 18 to 19 were 11.8 times more likely to be imprisoned than white males of the same age. We also have to remember that statistics also take away from the nuances of this situation. We're talking about real people. This is deeper than numbers. Since 1986, black neighborhoods have been devastated by the racist drug policy, in correlation to the dissolution of family that happened during slavery, where families were forced to be separated. They're one and the same. The incarceration of black men continued to keep African American families separated. Oh my god, Tirrrb! At first there was a 13th Amendment, which legalized modern slavery in the prison industrial system. And then President Lyndon, the first president to ever utilize a drug war against a minority group under the basis of Patriot America. And then there was President Nixon, who escalated his policies. Don't tell me that Reagan, did he really do worse? Oh my god, yeah. Goddamn. He did the worst. He did the worst. On October 14th, 1982, or as I like to call it, the day of the Antichrist, US President Ronald Reagan became the next white supremacist leader in line at the criminalization party of black men by resolving to put an end to rampant drug abuse. He deemed the use of illicit drugs a threat to national security, which was honestly simple enough at face value. Okay, we don't like harmful drugs, until you realize that all the depictions of drug dealers at the time were intertwined with the black image. And again, the sentiment starts to veer off towards black territory. While again, he wasn't the first president to concern himself with the issue of substance abuse, Reagan's presidency marked a growth in targeted anti-substance policies. As we discussed, public concern surrounding drug use has been increasing nationally for decades, fueled by multiple campaigns and cultural sentiments amidst the white gaze. In particular, Reagan sought to eliminate the smoking of crack, which was a specific type of cocaine. This created controversy, since Reagan's legislation carried much harsher punishments for possession of crack rather than powder form cocaine, which was more expensive. Critics argued that this legislation disproportionately targeted marginalized communities. I mean, we watched The Wolf of Wall Street. We know who's doing the cocoa. They thought it was O.J. Mayo that was in love with the cocoa. Nah. You were deceived. While cocaine use was rampant throughout the 1970s to 1980s, most data shows that crack was not popularized until media outlets reported on it. Major news channels manufactured information about an epidemic, effectively mass marketing a newer, stronger, and far more dangerous form of an already potent drug. And as a result, the news reporters created an epidemic. They manifested that into existence. They manifested the epidemic. I should call my ex. By 1984, an estimated 4 to 6 million Americans were regularly using crack, many of whom were poor and underprivileged teens and young people in urban areas, which is code word for black. Urban means black. Cocaine, which in itself was an expensive commodity, was unavailable to the demographic of impoverished African Americans. But crack, which was available in smaller and stronger quantities, was cheap and easy to get, which subsequently led to more captures of black impoverished teens. In fact, the number of people incarcerated for non-violent drug offenses increased from 50,000 in 1980 to more than 400,000 by 1997. Reagan's most impactful drug-related policies included the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984, along with the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986. The Comprehensive Crime Control Act increased punishments for possession of cannabis and introduced federal mandatory minimum sentences. The mandatory minimum sentences created harsher penalties for those found in possession of illicit substances. And then later in 1986, the Anti-Drug Abuse Act instituted a 5-year minimum penalty without parole for the possession of 5 grams of crack cocaine. Meanwhile, the same sentence was given for the possession of 500 grams of powder cocaine. This 100-to-1 disparity is obviously racially biased because crack cocaine was more likely to be used by poor, marginalized Americans, many of whom were African Americans. On the other hand, powder cocaine was more expensive and more likely to be used by affluent white Americans. So if you want to do coke, you gotta be white. Sorry, black man. Do you want Pepsi instead? Or a 5-year minimum sentence? According to the ACLU, in 1986, before the enactment of new minimum sentences, African Americans were subject to 11% higher federal drug sentences than white Americans. 4 years later, that number grew to 49%. Ronald Reagan did not work alone in the war on drugs though. The devil has his accomplices. I got my flamingo, he got his devil-ass wife. His wife, Nancy Reagan, who ran the Just Say No campaign, which is comparable to the DARE program on steroids. The wife of the devil, Nancy Reagan, basically traveled the country endorsing this Just Say No campaign, appearing on television news programs, talk shows, and public service announcements. This simple motto, in face of the intricate issues surrounding drug abuse in impoverished minority neighborhoods, is eerily reminiscent of Marie Antoinette. You know, when all the peasants of France were starving and she hopped on her pedestal and said, "Let them eat cake." Similarly, black oppressed youth were asked just to say no to drugs. And I know the Marie Antoinette situation never happened, but it's plausible. White women you probably do that. Thank you, Nancy Chan. Surveys also suggest that the campaign may have led to a spike in public concern over the country's drug problem. In 1985, the proportion of Americans who saw drug abuse as the nation's #1 problem was between 2% and 6%. Then in 1989, that number jumped to 64%. Reagan's policies also played a big role in that. But Nancy Reagan, there's a spot reserved in hell for you. I should know. I'm El Diablo. This is a heartogram though. This isn't a... There was also Daryl Gates, the police chief in LA, who made... Wait, I'm recording this again and I'm still shocked. He literally made the DARE program. The program which still exists today, mind you. The program which pairs students with local officers in a perceived effort to reduce drug use, gang membership, and violence. Students partaking in this program supposedly are meant to understand the dangers of substance abuse and take a pledge to stay away from drugs and gangs. It's like gaslighting ethnic groups that these generational problems of drug abuse can be waved off just by putting your right hand on your heart. JROTC will save black youth. DARE has been implemented in about 75% of US school districts and in Canada too. Yes, I live in Edmonton and I have participated in the program and have broken my oath multiple times. Honestly, I just might do it again. Fuck you, DARE Lion. I don't like you. I don't like you. However, sadly, Ronald Reagan and all his political actors succeeded in their mission. They successfully defranchised and oppressed minority areas, specifically black areas, and pushed the gears of laws into white favor. The war on drugs resulted in a dramatic increase in the number of people incarcerated for drug-related offenses. The numbers jumped from approximately 50,000 incarcerated for drugs before Reagan to nearly 400,000 after his presidency. There have been so many lives destroyed and picked apart by the Reagan administration's war on drugs. No matter what economic gain was brought forward, it shouldn't be a foil against criticism. Leaders like Lyndon and Reagan, no matter how charismatic they are in their pursuit to help all Americans, are only looking at one demographic: white people. Prior to advertisement belief though, Reagan is not the big bad devil at play. The devil at play is the institutional racism which continues to fuel these white supremacists by giving them a fertile sociological fabric ripe for the planting of oppression. Reagan is gone and we can't do much about his presidency, but issues like the war on drugs are still being justified magnified to this day, with programs like the DARE program and the issue of incarceration being a major hindrance to the lives of black youth in the modern day. Only when we dissect the history of oppression, we find the answers to move forward. So let's accept the fact that Reagan is the devil and have a conversation about the dismantlement of the prison industrial complex. But time's up. The portal's open. I gotta get back to my channel, but thanks for having me.
Alright, so what if I told you that in a sick, twisted way, Ronald Reagan was one of the more influential unsung figures in the creation of hip-hop music? It's not a good thing, but it's a thing. Like, along with Sylvia Robinson, DJ Kool Herc, you might want to throw Reagan in there for being instrumental because he helped create the environment that birthed hip-hop music in the 80s. Why? Because Ronald Reagan presided over the expansion of the war on drugs and at the same time the proliferation of cocaine into black communities in the United States. It's a story so heinous in retrospect that it's hard to believe it's true, but basically the image of crack in the 80s, the gangster lifestyle, the rundown streets of New York and other inner cities that became iconic for black people telling stories of struggle and lack and survival under dire circumstances, probably is not here like it is if not for one Ronald, whatever the fuck his middle name is, Raymond. I know it's 666. That's part of the joke. That's why he's well trodden in these hip hop streets. So let's go back to the 1970s under Richard Nixon, another racism Mount Rushmore figure. Nixon, who had already run on a not so subtle anti-black and anti-civil rights campaign, first instituted the war on drugs in hopes to demoralize both the weed smoking anti-war hippies as well as black people that were using heroin in inner cities in America. Americans, especially back then, were conservative, and so the image of free love hippies and funky and fly, but also maybe high black folks, were easy images to villainize in order to create for a political movement. And thus the war on drugs was born. Now, surprisingly, if you look at Nixon's anti-drug moves, they are a little bit more akin to public health initiatives for drug abuse treatment and prevention than what you might think for a figure like Nixon. It's actually much closer to the anti-drug policies that are becoming more prominent today, especially since the image of drug abuse is much wider in 2022 than it was in the 70s and 80s, as opioids and meth have ravaged predominantly white communities in America compared to how crack was treated in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. See, in the 80s when Reagan took over, he greatly expanded the war on drugs to be not about public health and prevention, but to be a punitive and carceral policy, creating zero tolerance policies, mandatory minimum sentences, and sending literally hundreds of thousands of black men into prisons, which then expanded the demand for prisons and created a thriving private prison system, which only enhanced the demand for prisoners, which incentivized even more tough on crime policies. And hopefully you see how this becomes a very vicious cycle. The prison population in America went from around 50,000 in 1980 to around 400,000 in 1997. Now, even though I've never used a drug in my entire life, I am personally for the legalization of all drugs, if not just for seeking the significant reduction in the prison population that would hopefully occur. And I say hopefully because the state usually finds a way to solve one problem and create another at the same time. But I will say that crack was ravaging communities as well as heroin in the 70s and 80s. And while we now know that these policies were incredibly destructive to black people and black communities over the long run, at the time, many black folks who were living in utter mayhem were amenable to any type of direct action against the rising drug problem in their communities. That's one thing I think we need to be more cognizant of when we look at these issues and topics and policies over time, is that a lot of us were in on the caper in one form or another. Black families and children were being terrorized by street crime, gangs, and addiction, and they wanted something to happen. They just made the mistake of trusting their elected officials to address the issue, and they did what we know many of these elected officials do. They acted in their best interest or in the interest of the state instead of the interest of the people.
Instead of ramping up the public health aspects of the war on drugs and emphasizing treatment over punishment, they did the opposite. And they did it in a way to explicitly target black people. For example, cocaine is made from the coca plant leaf in South America. After going through a chemical process, it is made into a powder that is then sniffed, providing a significant high that can last up to 15 minutes to a half hour. Cocaine is a designer drug that was and still is very expensive, making it much more prominent in white elite circles, Hollywood, and the growing suburbs of America. Crack, however, is a derivative of cocaine, cut with baking soda and put through a freebasing process that makes it smokable and much more cheaper, delivering a very fast, immediate high for a shorter period of time. However, even though cocaine is the purest, most expensive, and strongest form of this drug policies were made to make crack, the drug used by more people in the inner city, more criminalizable, meaning that 5 grams of crack possession carried a mandatory minimum of 5 years, while 5 grams of cocaine would likely get you probation, even though those 5 grams of cocaine were equivalent to like 500 grams of crack. The difference was in the complexion of the person holding the drug. But here's the other thing. Exactly how did crack make its way into urban centers in the first place? Since the 70s on into the 80s, the United States was involved in secondhand military activities in South America and really around the world, often arming and supporting fascist militias to fight communist uprisings because we were still in the Cold War, Red Scare era of this nation's illustrious history. Because these were in essence black ops and the United States government had no legal recourse to be involved in these activities, the government ended up cutting side deals with these militias to allow them to fund their wars by opening up greater drug markets in the United States. Markets that got the most traction in, you guessed it, inner city communities full of black and brown people. And who presided over this expansion of these illegal wars? Your boy, Ronald Reagan. And please believe that the labor practices used to produce this cocaine in South America was also exploitative and brutal. So I want to just drive that one home real quick. Nixon creates the war on drugs and it's actually not the worst thing ever somehow. Reagan takes this and expands it, but makes it more punitive and puts more people in jail, creating laws that explicitly target drug issues in inner cities where black and brown people live, which massively expands the prison population within those communities. And all the while, his administration was making sure that the same drugs he criminalized were actually more accessible in those same communities so he could essentially put more people in jail. It's like a Game of Thrones villain. And understand that the effects of mass incarceration are dire on black communities. Research on mass incarceration shows that it's cancerous to those communities and produces widespread damage that lasts generations. When these men and their communities become jailed, they are then a drain on the local economy because their living expenses are now subsidized by the community they came from, and they can no longer work to actually contribute to their local economy. Further, their social presence is missing in the form of possible community engagement or just parenting and partnering with their families. The combination of this reduces the educational and economic prospects of said community, causing it to suffer as a whole because now it can produce less and attract less resources to the community. This raises the poverty level and now the likelihood for more crimes to occur. Repeat the cycle and you see kind of how we are where we are right now. And when you look at some of the most deeply impoverished community in the country, like Detroit, Gary, Indiana, St. Louis, Missouri, you see this cyclical effect in real life. And the worst and most committed part is that the war on drugs was lost. It never really fixed anything. It did not improve or change things at all, because that's not what police and tough on crime policies do. The legacy of this policy and its effects carried on for decades. It informed the 1994 crime bill under Clinton and tons of other racially motivated issues within our justice system. This policy and framework was expanded and mimicked by nations in bed with the United States. So even before Reagan, you saw similar frameworks pop up in Afghanistan and during the Reagan administration in the American South and in Mexico. The United States have continued to fund right-wing regimes and private militaries to continue to keep their boots on the necks of their citizens in the name of fighting the war on drugs. But here's the final kicker. The shit didn't work. The ridiculous but probably unsurprising thing is that for all this death and destruction, millions of lives lost in the street or in poppy fields or in prison cells, billions of dollars made and spent on drugs and anti-drug militias and police activities. None of it has done anything to stop the proliferation and uses of drugs, let alone its destructive power. Every disruption in drug trafficking and production is quickly patched up. Demand for drugs isn't going down and drug overdoses are going up. Further, policies for harm reduction and legalization struggle to get traction nationwide, even for drugs like marijuana, which have been proven historically to essentially be harmless and non-addictive when used properly. Sadly, somehow all of these elements of Ronald Reagan's legacy are swept under the rug. The Republican Party still bandies him about like some aspirational figure who changed America for the better, and he did, if your goal was to accelerate America's descent into fascism. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, did you know Reagan is responsible for the radicalization of Martin Luther King, and the fact that nobody knows today that Martin Luther King was not just this cute, cuddly black Santa Claus that wanted us all to get along, that he was a radical socialist during his time? I could go on forever, but I need to take a nap. I'm shooting it back to y'all. Enjoy.
So, are you feeling better, Think Peace Tribe? You know you don't have to call me that. You can just call me Lonnie. Oh, well, Lonnie, are you feeling any better? I mean, the video is almost over, so what's wrong? Well, I mean, I did get upset, but it's only 'cause I don't know where these people are coming from. You mean like you can't see it from their perspective? Yeah, exactly. It's like, why do these people act the way that they do when it comes to Reagan? I just don't understand it. And also, I'm trying to educate as many people as I can with this video, but what's the point if I can't get through to these people? What if I miss something? What if... Lonnie, I'm gonna stop you right there. And I want you to listen to what I have to say. I've been in this game for a long time, and I've seen a lot of people like you. You guys overthink too much, and that's something that you should never do. Your video is going to impact someone. Someone's gonna click on this video wondering what a Think Peace Tribe is, and at the end, you might actually educate them about something that they had no idea about. Oh, and by the way, you always come up with good closing remarks for your videos, so I know you'll come up with something good. I can't wait to see the video, my man.
You know, throughout the entire writing process for this video, I was wondering, why do the people that support Reagan turn a blind eye to, well, all of the negative stuff that he's ever done? And I think that I figured out why. But before I get into it, let's end this video with Part 6, the conclusion. So, where do we go from here? There are two people that I want to talk about, named Angela Davis and Malcolm X. Now, in the clips that I'm showing you, Angela Davis answers a question that is stemmed in a lack of knowledge, or what you would call ignorance. And Malcolm X, where he uses a perfect analogy on why progress is never being made in America. Now, these videos are important because they helped me figure out why the people that support Reagan turn a blind eye to everything that he did. And it really boils down to the people who support Reagan either don't know about Reagan and will support him because they were only told positive things about Reagan, or they lack empathy and know what Reagan did and will still support him anyways because nothing that he did negatively affected them. Let's play the Angela Davis clip first because it proves my first point.
It doesn't make any sense at all. Whether I approve of guns, I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Some very, very good friends of mine were killed by bombs that were planted by racists. I remember from the time I was very small, I remember the sounds of bombs exploding across the street, our house shaking. I remember my father having to have guns at his disposal at all times because of the fact that at any moment we might expect to be attacked. The man who was at that time in complete control of the city government, his name was Bull Connor, would often get on the radio and make statements like, niggers have moved into a white neighborhood, we better expect some bloodshed tonight. And sure enough, there would be bloodshed. After the 4 young girls who lived, one of them lived next door to me. I was very good friends with the sister of another one. My sister was very good friends with all 3 of them. My mother taught one of them in her class. My mother, in fact, when the bombing occurred, one of the mothers of one of the young girls called my mother and said, can you take me down to the church to pick up Carol? We heard about the bombing and I don't have my car. And they went down, and what did they find? They found limbs and heads strewn all over the place. And then after that, in my neighborhood, all of the men organized themselves into an armed patrol. They had to take their guns and patrol our community every night because they did not want that to happen again. I mean, that's why when someone asks me about violence, I just find it incredible. Because what it means is that the person who's asking that question has absolutely no idea what black people have gone through, what black people have experienced in this country since the time the first black person was kidnapped from the shores of Africa.
And that's what I was trying to get at. This interviewer didn't know about the struggles that black people have gone through and was able to ask such a stupid question like that. It stemmed from a place of ignorance, of not knowing, just like most of the people that support Ronald Reagan. And because of that, they can easily respond to questions like this with this. Let's play the Malcolm X clip because it proves my second point.
I will never say that progress is being made. If you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches, there's no progress. If you pull it all the way out, that's not progress. The progress is healing the wound that's a blow made. And they haven't even begun to pull a knife out, much less try and heal the wound. They won't even admit the knife is there.
And there it is again. They won't even admit that the knife is there. Malcolm was talking about how America won't even acknowledge the struggle that black people go through and how they lack empathy on purpose because to them it really doesn't matter. They know what's going on and won't care or acknowledge that there's something wrong. And just like Reagan supporters, some of them are like this. They lack empathy. they are racist, homophobic, and don't care about others. Everything negative that Reagan did, it didn't affect them. So why should they care? So it's not a surprise that Reagan left office with one of the highest approval ratings. It's not a surprise that everything negative that he did isn't taught in schools. It's not a surprise that these same people consider Trump to be the second coming of Ronald Reagan. But where do we go from here? Well, for one, educate yourself and realize that everything that is told to you may not be the real truth, especially when it comes to US presidents, because Reagan was bad and there are many more people like him out there that I can talk about. So yeah, I hope you got something out of this video. Maybe your negative opinions about Reagan got reaffirmed. Maybe you learned something about Ronald Reagan. And maybe, just maybe, you changed how you thought about Reagan. And if you did, well, tell me about it in the comments. And we can call Reagan, the bad, corrupt, destructive, hateful, vicious, and vile man that he truly is. Because Ronald Reagan is the devil. And I hope that this video explained to you why that is. But yeah, that's pretty much all I gotta say. Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Personally, I hate black people, Ruckus. That's why I did everything I could to make their lives miserable. Crack? Me. AIDS? Me. Reaganomics? Come on, I'm in the name.